Oh, okay, here it goes. I heard someone's walking up, so let's give them a chance to get here. It's easy to become overwhelmed with all of it, and I try to not be that way, but it's very difficult to not talk about it in a general way and also in a specific way. But that's why I continually say be gentle with yourself, because it can seem overwhelming, but the time we take to develop it is really up to us. And as long as we stay on the path, the end is certain. It really is. There's a phrase called the stream mentor, and it's kind of misunderstood.
Isabella?
Hello, Isabella. Hello, Nash. Back for more, are you? Are your parents coming?
No, my mom, they were here, and my mom started getting really sick.
Oh, boy.
Yeah. She had like a headache and a stomach ache today. And she was like, I'm just going to go. Maybe it's stress or whatever.
Yeah.
And then like 5 minutes before we were about to leave, she starts like throwing up.
Well, I hope she feels better soon, but I look forward to seeing her soon, too.
Yeah, so
Well, the talk today is on the Bhaddekaratta Sutta, which is a sutta on, Bhaddekaratta means auspicious. It's the sutta on the auspiciousness of the Dhamma, but an auspicious day. An auspicious day is a day that we have to develop the Dhamma. That's an auspicious day. And every day can be an auspicious day. But first we'll meditate for 20 minutes. So find your relaxed meditative posture. And gently close your eyes and gently close your mouths. Excuse me. And holding your back straight, but not stiff. Your ears aligned with your shoulders, aligned with your navel. But holding yourself very loosely, very gently, very lovingly. Allow yourselves to settle into this room, settle onto your seats, settle into your bodies, and settle into your minds. And take a moment to become aware of the sensation of breathing in your body. Just get a feel for what that's like, to be mindful of your breath in your body. And while remaining mindful of your breath in your body, notice that thoughts are flowing. We're conscious beings, thoughts should be flowing. The purpose of meditation is to not be distracted by your own thoughts. So when you find that you're caught up in your thinking again, simply acknowledge that and return your mindfulness to the sensation of breathing. I'll repeat that. When you find that you're caught up in your thinking again, simply acknowledge that and return your mindfulness to the sensation of breathing. Relaxing your thoughts, remaining mindful of your breathing. And we'll meditate for 20 minutes with callbacks every 5 minutes. Relaxing thoughts, remaining mindful of your breathing. Relaxing thoughts, remaining mindful of your breathing. relaxing thoughts, remaining mindful of your breathing. If a persistent thought or feeling arises, stay with it for a moment or two. Recognize it as impermanent and return your mindfulness to the sensation of breathing. And we'll meditate for 5 more minutes. Take a moment to notice the quality of your mind. Be at peace with your mind. And when you're ready, you can gently open your eyes. So the Bhaddekaratta Sutta, if anybody has any questions, just let me know. You don't have to wait till the end. Does everybody know that I send an email out that tells what sutta I'll be talking about and a link to it?
First time, but I forgot until right now.
Well, that's why I'm saying it again. Yeah, I send an email out on Mondays and Thursdays with links to the talks I'll be giving. If you want to read it before, you don't have to. But that's one of the reasons why I do it, just so you know what's coming up, coming attractions. The Bhaddekaratta Sutta teaches the importance of being mindfully present of life as life unfolds. And that's really the essence of the Dhamma. It's the essence of a peaceful and calm mind. It's the essence of happiness. Everything the Buddha taught during his 45-year teaching career was taught in the context of developing understanding of Four Noble Truths and release from clinging to self-referential views rooted in ignorance of those truths. The title of the sutta means an auspicious day. An auspicious day in this context refers to a day that is significantly favorable towards developing awakening as the Buddha defines awakening. That is, developing a profound understanding of dukkha, of disappointment, unsatisfactory experiences, ongoing suffering, and recognizing and abandoning all self-referential views rooted in ignorance of Four Noble Truths. Clear so far? Somewhat so. Here the Buddha's references in this sutta to the 5 clinging aggregates of form, feeling, perceptions, mental fabrications, and confused consciousness to describe an ignorant view of self. I know some of you haven't really heard much about the 5 clinging aggregates. The 5 clinging aggregates is a description the Buddha uses to describe the ongoing personal experience of dukkha, of suffering. And they're called 5 clinging aggregates because there's 5 aggregates or components to that. Form, physical form, feelings, perceptions, mental fabrications, and ongoing consciousness. Now remember, that's not some grand cosmic consciousness. It's a consciousness rooted in ignorance. And if you think about that, and I don't want to get into a class on this, but I will give it soon. If you think about those 5 components, every one of those components are things that we use to describe ourselves to ourselves. They're the components that we use to continue the story about ourselves in the broader framework of the world at large. Is that clear? And the easiest way to look at that is, of course, we identify ourselves as this physical body, and we do just about anything to protect this physical body and hope that this physical body, even though we know it can't last forever, we hope it will. And that's kind of the beginning of ignorance, but I'm not really getting to the whole context. But the 5 clinging aggregates are the personal experience of suffering. The Buddha teaches the importance of not being distracted to the past or to the future, or to remain mindfully present with life as life occurs. And that's one of the reasons why we use meditation to deepen concentration. So our mind isn't constantly thrown back and forth from the past to the future. You were describing that earlier. That's another component of dukkha. When we're simply not present, it naturally gives rise to a lot of stress in our lives. The present moment is free of stress as long as we're not rigidly fixated on that too. It's another talk. The Bhaddekaratta Sutta. The Buddha was staying at Savatthi, at Jita's Grove, Anathapindika's monastery. There he addressed the monks and nuns. Friends, I will teach you the meaning of an auspicious day. Chase after the past or project your thoughts to the future. That's one of those sayings that you see a lot attributed to Buddhism. Most of those sayings are wrong. This one is correct if you see it that way. Do not chase after the past or project your thoughts to the future. Think about the setting. The Buddha's teaching at least a few thousand monks and nuns, and there's really no way of knowing exactly how many are there. And they are constantly developing the Dhamma, and they have a general understanding, at least, of the Buddhist teachings, of the Four Noble Truths and the Eightfold Path. And there's likely quite a few awakened arahants in the audience at this time. But the reason why I'm bringing it up, he never gets into something that might be looked at as advanced teachings. Everything the Buddha ever taught is very practical, including this, isn't it? Don't let your thoughts get stuck in the past. Don't project them into the future. Stay mindful of what's occurring. And he knows that that's possible because he's taught the framework of how to do that. Most of us can't do it unless we have a framework for maintaining our mindfulness. in the present moment. Do not get entangled with the world. Be mindful only of what is occurring. Kind of like saying the same thing. Free of distraction, well concentrated, develop compassion informed by wisdom. The Buddha never talked about compassion without that second component. He didn't simply say, love everyone. He didn't teach some kind of utopic way of living in the world, which is a wrong view. Be compassionate, informed by true wisdom. That develops an auspicious day. Remember the context of teaching this. Mindfully engage with what is skillful. What is skillful? It's trained by the Eightfold Path. The future is uncertain, and death occurs equally for all. We can't avoid it. He's reminding those in attendance, and now us, 2,600 years later, that we don't know when the end's going to come. He would often refer to developing a Dhamma as take to the Dhamma like your hair's on fire. I don't have to worry about that. Meaning it's an important thing. In fact, we should make it a priority in our lives. It shouldn't overcome us, and it shouldn't overwhelm us. But what's more important than awakening? And when we understand that we can awaken in the next moment, provided that we've created the right conditions in our own minds, why not get to it? Why not get to it like our hair's on fire? The Buddha continues. Those who remain mindfully engaged with life as life occurs throughout the day have had a truly auspicious day. There's no big secret to it. We just have to learn how to be mindful of life as life occurs. How do we do it? Through the entire Eightfold Path. The Buddha continues. And how does one avoid chasing after the past? One does not get carried away with the delight that in the past I had such a body, I was this way. They might be thinking about, when you're my age, you might be thinking about, boy, when I was 25. But I might also be doing that at 61, thinking, boy, yesterday was such a wonderful day. I'm losing the present moment, aren't I? And we often do that when stress starts building up and we react to it, and we react to it in interesting ways. Usually our mind will then naturally go towards something that we viewed as pleasant, even if it's yesterday, 5 minutes ago, or 20 years ago. Or we might hope to get out of this by thinking about the vacation we're going on, or the new car we're getting tomorrow, or the new bike we're getting tomorrow. It could be anything to get out of the stress of the moment. The Buddha is saying we lose ourselves in that process. And if we can simply stay mindful of what is occurring, we will have an auspicious day. Why? Because we will be free of stress. We'll be living our life as our life unfolds, rather than living our life in the past or in the future, which is what most of us do. We don't even realize it. Let me go back to the beginning of that. And how does one avoid chasing after the past? One does not get carried away with the delight that in the past I had such a body. In the past I had such a feeling. In the past I had such a perception. In the past I had such a fabrication. A fabrication in this sense is a false assumption that we're making about ourselves in relation to the world. In the past, I had such a fabrication. In the past, I had such a consciousness, meaning that we were enamored with the way we were thinking and feeling and acting a moment ago, last year, at the carnival, when we were fishing, on vacation, all the other things that we use to distract ourselves. When one can do this, not chase after the past, this is called, what do you think the Buddha would call that? Not chasing after the past. Nothing complicated about that, is there? But I gotta digress just a little bit. I spent many years studying in the more mystical and esoteric forms of Buddhism, and they always left me unsatisfied, more confused, and more deluded in my thinking, although I didn't recognize it because I had this practice that I thought was bringing something to me. And when I finally started reading the words of the Buddha and realized the utter practicality of everything he ever said, he never wasted a word on anything mystical or magical. And I don't have anything against that. But in the framework of the Buddha's teaching, it was such a great relief to find something that I could finally practically apply to my life, such as something like this. Just be present. It's difficult. And if it was easy, the Buddha would just said a few words, go meditate and be present, and he would have went on with his life. And he realized it wasn't that simple. So he taught an Eightfold Path, and then he taught for 45 years how to do this, different suttas. And those suttas are still with us today. including this one. And how does one avoid, I read that already. This is called not chasing after the past. And how does one not project their thoughts onto the future? One does not get carried away with delight that in the future, I might have such a form. In the future, I may have such a feeling. In the future, I might have such a perception. In the future, I might have such a fabrication. In the future, I might have such a consciousness. This is called not projecting onto the future. A lot of, and again, I'm only referencing the Buddha's Dhamma when I say something like this. Most religions, including most modern Buddhist religions, insist on projecting your thoughts onto the future. If you do a lot of the right things right now in the future, sometimes it's in a future birth, it might be in a future birth, eons in the future, how it's often presented, you'll have an auspicious day, you'll awaken. The Buddha is saying, no, that's not true. We can only awaken in the present moment. And if you keep yourself well focused on the present moment, then you can awaken when? In this present moment, in this present lifetime. It's not something that takes endless lifetimes. It does not take, one of the references to dukkha is wandering in samsara. And that's often presented that we wander endlessly in samsara until we find a way to get out of it. The Buddha teaches a direct way, that Eightfold Path. And how does one become entangled with the world? An uninstructed, ordinary person, he's simply referring to someone who hasn't encountered the Eightfold Path or is not developing the Eightfold Path, lacking understanding of the Dhamma, sees form as the self or the self as form. We create a reference of this is me and this is all that I am. And the physical form is as impermanent as anything we can look at or think of, including our thoughts. A phrase I often use to describe this is continuity obscures impermanence. But every one of us that came in here half hour ago or so, whatever it is a completely different person, even physically. Although the change is so slow, it's almost imperceptible. But we know simply by looking at the science of physiology, millions of cells that are now in our body that weren't here a half hour ago, and there's millions of cells that were part of us a half hour ago that are gone. That's a constant process of becoming. Why is that important? Well, look, take that timeline out a little bit longer. Take it back to when you were 5 years old. That was you when you were 5, and it's the same you as it is now, isn't it? It's not. Everything has changed. Even your entire physical structure has changed at a cellular level quite a few times. Every cell in the body changes in years. We know that. So even that memory that we have of ourselves at 5 or 10 years old and insisting that that's me is a false view, isn't it? A right view is simply recognizing the ongoing process of becoming. And in that person, in my case, 56 years of becoming, my body is completely different. And my mind has the potential to be different, meaning going from a wrong view, an ignorant view of the true nature of reality, to a right view, if I develop the Eightfold Path. And in that way, I'm changing my conditioned thinking. And that's really what the Buddha is getting at here. We can change our conditioned thinking, our thinking rooted in wrong view, by having a series of auspicious days that are framed by the Eightfold Path. And then we no longer cling to form as me. We no longer cling to feelings as me. This is how I feel. And when we do that, think about how many times we blame the world or other people for how we feel. Because we're identifying with our feelings. Or we create perceptions about the world. Being a Democrat is better than being a Republican, or being a liberal, or being an Indian, whatever it might be. Everybody has a view. Being a certain religion, having certain beliefs. Those are perceptions. And often when we form a perception, we become very rigid about those perceptions because we've created an identity over that. And we defend that even in the face of creating more suffering for ourselves and others. And I'm using political stuff. I probably shouldn't, because it's not just that way. It's likes and dislikes. We do it all the time. We identify ourselves in a certain way. And from that point, then we create assumptions. An assumption is a fabrication. It's a fixed view of how the world should be to keep me happy. Form, feeling, perceptions, mental fabrications, and that drives our ongoing consciousness, remember, rooted in ignorance. And that's what the Buddha is referring to. This self-referential structure, modern world calls it an ego, that will do anything to defend. And it's in that defense of this self-referential ego personality that we create all the stress, excuse me, all the stress and suffering in our lives and all the stress and suffering in the world. When you take that from an individual level to a group level to a national level to a global level. Every ill in the world, and I don't mean to be too simplistic, and this isn't, every ill in the world arises because of ignorance of the way things really are. It's a pretty, what's the right word, pretty broad statement, but are you following me with that statement? It's not to say that the end of ignorance globally is going to take place. It probably won't. But on an individual level, and the Buddha realized this 2,600 years ago. He didn't see himself as a savior. He didn't see his Dhamma as salvific. But he did understand that as each individual changes from a wrong view of the world to a right view in the world, we're extending peace within ourselves, and from within ourselves, it can spread out into the world. And that is certainly proven true, even during the Buddhist time. The Buddha grew up and taught in a time that was just as violent then as it is now in our world. And he lowered the violence and the competitive nature significantly during his lifetime. And that has continued to this day. Let me continue just so I can finish the sutta. I'll go back one line. Confused, they see feeling as self or the self as possessing feeling. And think about that line, possessing feeling. As soon as we identify with a feeling, we are possessing it, we're holding on to it, instead of recognizing that all feelings are as impermanent as all other things, including the cells in our body. Why possess a feeling? Why hold on to a good feeling or a negative feeling by hoping that it doesn't come again? As soon as we have a reaction to a negative feeling, that's a way of desiring, craving that it doesn't happen again. When if we just take a breath, that negative feeling will just pass. It's as impermanent, as all things. Is that clear too in the context of the sutta, that all feelings and thoughts, etc., the physical body, it's all impermanent? Confused, they see their fabrications as self, the assumptions we make about ourselves. This is me, which is another way that great saying, I can't think of who. I think, therefore I am. Well, that's a false statement, because the problem is that I think this is who I am. And now I do everything I can to defend this wrong view of myself. Better to say I thought about this and I just realized it's not me. Why? Because it's impermanent. How could it be me? Not to get out of the sutta, the Buddha would often say, where he's teaching anatta, the not self-characteristic, if it's impermanent, how can it be you? How could anything impermanent be a self? And I'm not going to get into that sutta tonight, but I do. How could anything that we use to describe ourselves be a true self if it's impermanent, if it's fleeting, if there's no substance to it? And so, yes.
How would an arahant identify themselves, or would they not?
Yes. So what a great question, Ash. And it shows that you're by your question, I can tell that you're developing an understanding because of the implication of that. An awakened human being simply understands that what had previously been thought of as a permanent fixed self is always in a process of becoming. That's the reason why the title of the book is Becoming Buddha, Becoming Awakened. If we live our lives well concentrated because of our meditation practice, and within the framework of the Eightfold Path, then we're always in a constant process of becoming awakened. If we ignore that, or we're not fortunate enough to even come across it, the only possibility is to continue to become more ignorant, meaning continue to establish a self rooted in ignorant views. So an awakened human being, an arahant, is continuing through their refined mindfulness to live life as it occurs without creating any additional stress. They're living a life with a mind imbued with peace. And when you think about that, isn't that what we're all after ultimately? We just don't know how to go about it. Many people think that by acquiring power or possessions, a bigger house, take it to extreme, the right army, all of these things, that if we can do those things to isolate myself from the vagaries of dukkha, then I can maintain a calm and peaceful mind. It never happens. But if we let go of the need to protect this self-referential ego self, become awakened, which is possible for any human being, then we let go of those self-referential views that keep us rooted in ignorance. Does that answer your question?
It does. And ever since like the beginning, of, not to interrupt, but
no, please. This is
how you talked about how you said something along the lines of people identifying themselves with the 5 aggregates of dukkha.
Yep.
And that's really been, I've been listening and paying attention to the sutta, but that's really been like at the forefront of my mind, and how kind of, I don't have the right word, but how like real that, how true that feels.
Yeah.
And it's kind of scary, but really, I don't know, interesting and hopeful that, I don't know, I can realize that and just think about it.
Yeah, I mean, I think you will. Because as long as we talked about this a little earlier, as long as you continue to develop the framework of the Eightfold Path, it does become apparent. At first glance, 5 clinging aggregates does kind of sound like nonsense, but you have enough of a background now to see that it kind of fits. It makes sense to you a little bit. That little bit of fear that you recognize, almost everyone I've ever taught, and I can say about myself, when you start understanding the implications of what these teachings are taking you towards, there can be a lot of fear because it feels like annihilation at times, that you're letting go of yourself. What's going to happen to me when I let go of all these views, all these wrong views? What happens is you become Buddha. That's exactly how the Buddha described his awakening. On the web, do either one of you have my new book, Becoming Buddha? Mm-hmm. So let's talk about that after class tonight. But also on the website, linked on the first page is the Buddha describing his awakening in the Dhamma Sutta. And that's how he describes it. He had this fear when he realized the implications of what he was developing in his own mind. But at that point, he had to continue. So there is some fear because we're letting go of everything we think we are. But everything we think we are is like foam on the water. There's nothing there. And we can only understand that and realize it when we really let go of all those views and see what's left. What's left is an awakened human being who at that point maintain that refined mindfulness, can never fall back into dukkha. And now I should qualify that a little bit. I want to get through the sutta. It does not mean that there won't be challenges anymore in your life. It doesn't mean that you're going to live forever, for instance. That has nothing to do with awakening. It simply means you will stop reacting to the causes and conditions that are part of having a human life. So you might find people disagreeing with you. You might find a political climate being less than is ideal. You might find yourself aging and getting sick and eventually dying. But you'll understand, and you won't react to it anymore because you'll understand that's simply part of having a human life.
That's part of not contributing to your own suffering.
Exactly. There's another sutta you might look up, but I give a teaching on it most of these come around about every 6 months, called the Shamatha-Vipassana, and that's a sutta it's called the 2 arrows. And in that sutta, it clarifies that point of the difference between normal worldly causes and conditions, including sickness, aging, and death, and all the other things that occur, and reacting to it. There's the second arrow. When we react to it, it's like we are struck by the first arrow of life occurring in an unpleasant way. And then we stick the second arrow in by reacting to it. And that's a very simplification of that sutta. It's on the website too. But we all do that. When the Buddha awakened, he was still subject to sickness, aging, and death. In fact, there's 2 suttas that specifically talk about when the Buddha became ill. And one was the illness that eventually killed him. And he describes the physical suffering that he's going through. He got food poisoning. And which brings up a couple other points. So the Buddha, an awakened human being, couldn't miraculously heal himself of food poisoning. He got food poisoning. He's a human being. He's awakened, meaning that he no longer reacts to that. And there's an interesting discourse between the Buddha and his cousin about we got to do everything we can. Blah, blah. The Buddha said he was 80 years old at the time. He said, it's my time to go. And then Ananda wanted to blame the person that gave him the bad pork that got it. And his name was Chanda. He says it wasn't. Chanda was being compassionate. He was offering me a meal. There's no reason to blame him, et cetera, et cetera. He was not reacting to the situation. Think about someone who's not awakened, even if they're 80 or 90 years old and they were given a rotten piece of pork. They'd be pretty upset at the person that fed them, wouldn't they? At peace. No reason to blame anybody. It's a good example of what happens to an awakened human being. So you bring up some really good points, Nash. Did I bring some clarity to it? Okay. And it's always appropriate to do that, by the way, to bring up something that you want more clarity on or just to make a comment. Let me get my... I'll go back to that one again. Confused, they see their fabrications of self or their self as their fabrications. Think about how silly that is. A fabrication is just some thought construct. And yet I'm creating identity over it. How foolish is it? Why would I want to do it? Because I'm ignorant of the way things are. That's the real answer. And one of the reasons why it's important to recognize that it's just ignorance, because it avoids the need to overanalyze an assumption I have about myself. Why did I become a Republican, or why did I become a Democrat? Why am I a racist, or why am I not a racist? Why am I upset at color blue? We can get into all kinds of analysis of where this came from, what occurred in my past. It doesn't matter. If we know that our minds are in a reactive state, it's rooted in ignorance. And that's really all we need to know, because then we can get right to the heart of the matter. How do we end ignorance? We develop the Eightfold Path. We don't have to get into a blame game or an analysis game. We get right to the heart of the matter. Confused, they see their consciousness as self or their self as their consciousness. Again, the Buddha is pointing out it's silly to create an identity or to become enamored over our own thought process, especially when that thought process is rooted in ignorance. But we all do that. This is what is meant by becoming entangled with the world. And now we're getting to the important part. It's not too late. And how is one not entangled with the world? A follower of the Dhamma, who is well-versed and well-trained in the Dhamma, does not see form as self or the self possessing form. With right view established, they do not see feeling as the self or the self possessing feelings. With right view established, they do not see perceptions as self or the self possessing perceptions. So this might lead to that feeling of fear. If I don't identify with my feelings, does it mean that I don't feel anything? Do I become an automaton? And a lot of people jump to that assumption because we're so enamored with my feelings. We think we need our feelings to be alive. The Buddha is not saying when you're awakened you won't have any feelings. You'll simply cease craving after and identifying yourself with your feelings. You'll feel what's appropriate to feel. The other Tuesday's class, one of the people here was talking about a death in her family. And she described a way of going through the things that were appropriate, from the fear of hearing what was occurring to a cousin of hers, I believe she said, through the process of that person dying. She wasn't devoid of feelings. And the feelings that she was feeling, she didn't need them to be any different. She could feel the fear because it was appropriate. She could feel the grief when this person finally passed in a matter of 4 days. So the Buddha is not saying we shouldn't feel anything. What he's teaching is we should stop creating identities and the need for feelings to be any different. And that points to what your question is. So an arahant simply stays in the process of what's occurring and is continually becoming or maintaining their awakened state. When the Buddha heard that his dad was dying, he didn't just say, well, there's no such thing as a self. What do I care? That's ridiculous. He had great compassion for his father. And he got up off his cushion, left his Sangha and the safety of his Sangha, and walked 140 miles so he could be with his dad. And in his mind, he describes this. He just wanted he wanted to have the opportunity to see his dad one more time and give him one more teaching. It's great compassion with great wisdom, isn't it? But he didn't lose his mind over it. He did what was appropriate. That's what I'm talking about here. We don't lose it. We don't lose our feelings. We don't lose our thinking in any way. We simply lose self-referential views rooted in ignorance. established, they do not see fabrications as self or the self-possessing fabrications. With right view established, they do not see consciousness as a self or the self-possessing consciousness. This is called not being entangled with the world. The Buddha concludes that process of how do we avoid being entangled with the world with not identifying with our consciousness, which up until the point of awakening is entangled in the world. We see ourselves in reference to the world, rather than in a process of becoming or maintaining an awakened state of mind. The sutta concludes, to develop an auspicious day, remain present with your life as your life occurs. Do not chase the past or project your thoughts on the future. Remain free of entanglements with the world and mindful of what is occurring. Be mindful of impermanence and uncertainty. Those that do so will have an auspicious day. The Buddha concludes this by saying, so says this peaceful sage. He's identifying himself as that because he's done this. And he's pointing out that we can become the peaceful sage to ourselves by giving ourselves these auspicious days, by maintaining our mindfulness. In that concluding paragraph to this sutta, he describes an awakened human being and how to do it. And then there's also that understanding to achieve this auspicious goal. We have an eightfold path to develop, rooted in Shamatha-Vipassana meditation that supports the refined mindfulness of the entire eightfold path. So there's more to the sutta if you want to read it, but that's enough for the talk today. Thank you for listening. We'll go around the room, but are there any specific questions about this sutta?
I don't know where to begin. There's a lot of questions, but
let's start. It's good to see you tonight, Tim.
Likewise. I don't think it was this sutta you were talking about when Buddha traveled to see his father.
No, it's a different sutta.
Okay, so then I don't have a question on the sutta. It was that kind of threw me.
Why would he do it?
Yeah.
Because it was his dad.
Was he doing it for himself or for his dad?
No, he was doing it because neither one. He was doing it because it was appropriate.
Okay.
And it seems like a very fine point. How come there's no self in that? Why isn't this a selfish reason? You could say that awakening, in fact, those that disparage the Buddha's path, the Eightfold Path, call it a selfish path because it's focused on the self, isn't it? But it's so focused on the self in a way of recognizing all the things that I've developed that are not a self. That's the word anatta means, not a self, the views I'm holding of myself. And an awakened human being, becoming Buddha, has that mind of awakening that is always compassionate, imbued with great wisdom. So upon hearing that, someone had to tell him. I think it was Ananda, the Buddha's cousin, who was his attendant, said, we got word that your dad is dying. And there wasn't any, oh, that's awful to me. Why is this happening to me? But it was his father. And so he got up off his cushion to be with his dad. There's no self-referential view in there. He's not doing it even out of a sense of except that he knows that his dad is dying. And he did his best to get there on time. It seems like a contradiction. It seems like a paradox, doesn't it?
Yes, it does.
But we don't lose compassion. When the Buddha identified himself prior to his awakening, he would usually use this term, an unawakened bodhisattva. A bodhisattva is a human being that has great compassion for other human beings. But he was an unawakened bodhisattva because he was lacking the true wisdom of how to appropriately engage in that compassion. So an unawakened bodhisattva might hear, prior to his awakening, he might have heard, your dad's dying. And he would have done exactly the same thing. But in his mind was at peace. And that's the difference.
So in talking about that and with the sutta that you described today, that we talked about today, living an auspicious day, having an identity is based in the past that quote unquote would make you who you are, would be the
yes.
typical conventional wisdom thing to say. What Buddha is saying is that you can recognize those things, and they may indeed make you, but they're not. You don't cling to them.
Yes.
You don't live for that. You're
Yes.
in the present. Those things happen. You recognize it. Is that what he was saying?
That's exactly what he's saying.
Okay. So then,
We are all, everyone sitting here right now, is the culmination of every experience we've ever had. And that's another, Saturday's talk, I know you won't be here, but you can listen to it, is on karma and rebirth. That's the true meaning of karma. Karma is the present moment unfolding of past intentional acts moderated by whatever level of mindfulness or lack of mindfulness we have in this moment. Meaning that all the terrible things that have happened to a human being, we can drag with us and continue to experience the results of that with a reactive mind. Or we can start changing the way we look at ourselves in relation to the world, refine our mindfulness. And in that way, we can extricate ourselves from all that baggage we've carried around.
but
We
you
can
would still remember.
Oh,
you would
yeah.
still know it happened.
Of course.
You would just not react to it.
Not react to it. The Buddha would often use references to himself from the past before his awakening in order to teach something, because it was appropriate to use that. The only thing we lose upon awakening is ignorant views. There's even that continuity of ourselves in this body. But now, and from that point of awakening onward, we're no longer reacting to life from ignorant views. We're living life fully present with life as life occurs. And that is the true significance between an unawakened human being or an unawakened bodhisattva and an awakened bodhisattva. When the Buddha described an awakened human being, and there's some schools of Buddhism that teach that when you awaken, you just vanish. The Buddha himself, he spent 45 years after his awakening. He described the quality of mind of an awakened human being as calm or at peace. And he described that person as being unbound or released from clinging to ignorant views. That's his description of an awakened human being. So we're still alive, but we're no longer creating any additional stress in our lives from reacting to the world or because of the way we think. And our minds are at peace. So very important point you bring up.
That clarified it. Thank you.
Yeah. Any other comments or questions?
That light bulb went up on that. Thank you.
Great. So glad you're here tonight. Isabella, how are you? Is it Isabella or Isabel?
Isabel.
Isabel. Thank you.
Hello. How are you today?
I'm good. That's it. Thank you. How are you?
I'm good.
Good.
I am not to be overwhelmed, and because what you're teaching and like what I'm gaining instead of gaining, it just feels very true, and like it's just true, but it's the way I have, like the way I am living my life, or have lived my life up until this point. It is that like there is this fear of like releasing all of these, not fear, but it's not fear like I'm a like scary movie, like you're afraid fear. It's just this like, it's new, it's something, I don't know. So it's just different, and can be a little overwhelming, but in a way that what resonated with me in the last class that you said was that you fall back onto the three things: Buddha, the Dhamma, and your Sangha.
Yes.
And so that's kind of what I'm like trying to that's what I'm kind of relying on when I start getting a little like anxious, I guess. I don't know.
No, that's the right word.
Yeah.
There's some anxiety there.
Yeah, it really is. It's the anxiety, but it's not fear that like what I'm doing is wrong. Like it's like I don't know how to explain it.
Oh, I understand exactly what you're saying, and I think everybody else does too.
Yeah.
It's hard to finally explain that little point of anxiety and where it's coming from, because it's ultimately coming from ignorance. But you have a way to go before you realize that. Just about everyone I've ever taught and my own experience has gone through that anxiety when you start, and Nash was mentioning it too, when you start realizing the ramifications of this, it can be overwhelming. And it can seem like there's so much to learn too. Yeah. But there really isn't. It really is very simple. But one of the ways that our self-referential ego self, anatta, the five clinging aggregates, seeks to continue ignorance is through fear, through that feeling of annihilation, of it is just too much. It really isn't. The Buddha taught something for every human being who engaged with it to engage with it and awaken. One of the reasons why you'll always hear me say be very gentle with yourself is just because of that. You can only develop it as fast as you can develop it. I don't even know if I want to use the word fast, because it's not a matter of doing it. I know I use the phrase "take to it like your hair's on fire," but I'm just saying that to engage in right effort. Right effort is the sixth factor of the Eightfold Path, which simply states for a reasonable amount of time, and you need to continue to broaden your understanding of the Eightfold Path. If you do that, you're something called a stream enterer. Another modern phrase that's misunderstood. It's usually applied to people that are close to awakening, and it's just not true. The Buddha used the term to describe someone who has noble truths in the Eightfold Path and has started to develop that, and he called them a stream enterer. The meaning is that once you are in the stream, you are assured of reaching the other side of the stream, provided that you stay well focused, and it sounds like you will. Be gentle with yourself, continue with your practice, do your best to be part of our Sangha. You bring a lot to it. And I'm going to give you a copy of the book after class so you can start looking at it that way. It's a little easier than referring to the website. That being said, in the book and on the website, there's a sutta called the Ratana Sutta, which is the sutta on the three refuges. Take a look at that, and you'll get a little broader understanding of that.
One more thing.
Please.
This awakened state and the becoming Buddha, I don't mean to do this, it's just, I guess my conditioned mind is thinking and I guess this is me thinking into the future instead of staying in the present, in this present moment. It's being this way, or being present and being in this reality that doesn't exactly, not everybody exists in the same, we're not all on that same way of thinking or being.
Meaning as awakened?
Yeah,
yes.
As awakened, or even on the path, being able to constantly, and I guess maybe the answer is through practice, is being given, so going to your job and having all these things come up, yep. Or for me being a student and having a timeline for things and stressors and this and that, and it's how to how that and not. I don't know.
No, it's another great question, and not that the question is common. It isn't, but it comes up a lot because you're understanding, like Nash is, you're understanding the implications of what you found yourself, what you fell into. So yeah, what happened? How do I live in the world when I'm awakened and free of those views? I'll use the Buddha as an example. He lived the most successful and important life any human being ever lived post his awakening, and he was engaged with the world in an almost 24/7 way. He spent a lot of his days with his Sangha removed from the world, but he also spent at least an hour every day on his alms round. He went out and got his food just like everyone else, and he was often called upon by the rulers, the kings and the governors of the society of that time, for advice and counsel, and also for teaching. What happens when you become an awakened student or an awakened employee? You are now the most mindful student and mindful employee that is capable, that you're capable of. And that just simply makes you more effective. And you lose being in those situations with needing those situations to be different than they are. So imagine being a student or an employee, and you're able to maintain a peaceful and calm mind while as skillful a teacher as you would hope, or a customer isn't as pleasant as they might be. You're able to maintain a calm and peaceful mind. Isn't that wonderful? Isn't it wonderful to be closer to the beginning of your life than the end, and realize that? Really, you can enjoy the fruits of awakening much longer than someone who takes to the Dhamma later in life and awakens. That being said, it's important to take to it like your hair is on fire, but always be very gentle with yourself and understand that you are now in a process of becoming. And so that points back to the potential of each moment, the potential of being mindful. Each moment holds the potential to continue towards awakening, or each moment also holds the potential to continue ignorance. It's more skillful to incline your mind towards awakening, but continuing ignorance isn't wrong, it's just unskillful. Always be gentle with yourself. Does that answer your question?
Yeah.
How's your meditation going?
Good. It's doing well.
You're able to maintain the method?
Yeah, I'm able to maintain it. I just actually, in this meditation that today we did was a little difficult. I noticed that I told that like in the middle, the 2 middle frames, I kind of just went off. But I got back to my breath like before you would chime in. But I guess there was this stuff coming up that I was trying to, not cling on to, but like know that it's there and like let it go.
That is meditation, because that will always happen. You'll have meditation sessions where it seems like for the whole time you're meditating, you're struggling to maintain mindfulness of your breath. And then you'll have times where it's almost effortless. And it doesn't matter. One feels better than the other. But as long as you remember that the point of meditation is to deepen concentration, every time that you recognize that you're caught up in your thoughts, even if they're agitating thoughts, and come back to the sensation of breathing, excuse me, you're engaged in the meditation practice appropriately, and it will deepen your concentration. Excuse me. As you continue to develop the entire framework of the Eightfold Path, that will support your meditation practice, and your meditation practice will support developing and integrating the Eightfold Path. So you're doing great after a week. Thank you. Nash, I'm sorry. I know you had your hand up a moment ago.
Oh, no, that's okay. When you said something about how a modern teaching of Buddhism being in the stream, a stream enterer.
Yep.
Excuse me. Buddhism is taken as like being close to awakened, and that's not quite what Buddha would have meant by that.
Yes.
I just had a thought that it kind of, and then you sort of answered that for me, is like once you enter the stream, you are going to get to the other side. Like what I thought was, well, once you are aware of this, and if you want to stop your ignorance, you will get there.
Yes, the same thing.
So that kind of, you answered my comment.
Yeah, well, the stream is just a metaphor, but what you just said is the practical way.
Yeah.
If you want to be rid of ignorance, develop the Eightfold Path, and you're there.
Mm-hmm. I noticed something really interesting in this meditation session where I have had problems feeling my flow of thoughts while I'm being mindful of my breath.
Mm-hmm.
Like it's one or the other. And there was a really strange sensation where I was like mindful of my breathing, but I was still like my self-talk and just like I don't know. It was different, because usually it's either I'm banishing my thoughts and just thinking about my breath, or I'm getting distracted. So that was a new sensation to experience, and that was the first time was this, and it was weird. I was thinking about a song that I really like,
but it wasn't distracting you. Thank you for saying that. That's a very insightful look at concentration, because, like I say in the instructions, we're conscious beings. Thoughts should be flowing. The point of meditation is to not be distracted by our thoughts. It's impossible. I used to say when I first started teaching, meditation is often taught as to develop a trance-like state, to be void of thinking. And the only way to do that as a human being is to cut off your head. I don't suggest that in any way. But again, meditation is often taught that way. that we should enter this state of nothingness. And I got a whole lot of stories I could say about that, but I won't tonight. The point of meditation is to not be distracted by our thoughts. Lorna, who comes on Tuesdays and Saturdays, put it this way one time, when she had that same realization, that it's like her thoughts are here, they're flowing, and her breath is up here. And you're mindful of the breath, but the thoughts are always there, and they should always be there, but we're just not distracted by that. As we deepen our concentration, true meditation and even other types of meditation practice are taught as you're developing spaciousness, and you really are. There's a real space in time between one thought and the next as we start developing concentration. And it really is that skill that we develop on our cushions of a well-concentrated mind, that we're able to take off our cushions. And when we find ourselves reacting to life with a well-concentrated mind, we're able to practice restraint at that point and not react. That's another way of saying it, is we're able to maintain our mindfulness. We don't have to lose our minds in a real way. Your meditation practice is going well.
It is. I wasn't able to. There are some mornings where I wake up like right before I have to go to work.
Yeah.
So I'm not able to, but I don't beat myself up about it.
Good.
I just meditate when I can.
Yeah.
And just one last thing, a thought that I had today during like listening to the sutta was in taking refuge in the Dhamma, was how consistent it all feels. Like how just not like how we talked about last class, not wanting to change things seems to be a very common theme. And
it is
like talking about the clinging aggregates, those seem to come up often too. It's just, I don't know, everything that, I've only been doing this for a week, but everything seems to like tie in and hold each other up.
Yeah.
And that's satisfying. Not satisfying, but comforting.
That's a good word. The dukkha is an ongoing unsatisfactory experience. The opposite Pali word is sukha, and that means flourishing in life, which also means that you are satisfied with your life as it occurs. It doesn't have to be any different. So it's a good word to use. What I've noticed, I've been teaching about 7 or 8 years, is, and the Buddha even references this, there's some people that come across the Dhamma, this is even during the Buddhist time, and imagine an awakened human being is giving these teachings, not some old bald. And there were many people that listened to the words directly from the Buddha, and they just didn't resonate with them. And that's not right or wrong, it's just the way it is. And I've noticed the same thing. If everybody that ever came through this class and they hear my teachings is basically the same, if they got interested and kept coming, I'd be teaching in Madison Square Garden now. And again, that's not my aspiration. I consider myself incredibly fortunate for what's developed here in Frenchtown. It's remarkable. Not everybody takes to it. And it was never, again, the Buddha didn't see himself as a savior or this teaching as salvific. Not everybody will. There's some people that seem to be open to it. It resonates to them on some level. And they continue. And there's also some people that have come to class and they kind of dip their toe in, and sometimes it's that fear of where is this going, and that stops them from coming for a while, and then they come back, and that's pretty common too. And again, and then there's many people that listen to it and they say, that guy's full of nothing. He doesn't know what he's talking about. It's nonsense. And that's okay too. But when you realize it, when I finally realized the implication of these teachings and that they were accessible to me, that I could understand them, that was my auspicious moment in my life. And I can still remember what I was thinking. I can remember what I was wearing, where I was when it hit. And it wasn't like I awakened. I still had all the work to do. But I felt like you did. I said, after all these years, I spent many years in Tibetan and Zen Buddhism. After all those years, here it is right in front of me. I don't need any special karma, special empowerment, special teachers. All I have to do is apply this. And it works. That's the amazing thing. So thank you for bringing it up. Kevin, good to see you tonight. What do you think of all this?
I think it's such an auspicious day. I really do. it's amazing that young people who are just doing this for 1 week can have such amazing insight into it. So, and I think that's just an aspect of the Dhamma that happens.
Yeah.
Can happen.
Okay.
So, it's a great sutta because it just, reconfirms that one can awaken at any given time.
Yeah.
If one applies it. And it's a great different way of looking at the 5 cleaning aggregates, just the way he describes it in this sutta is so clear.
Yeah.
And it also then brings in anatta, the whole thing. It's just, again, he was just an amazing teacher who managed to bring these teachings together so well.
Yeah.
And you taught us so well. So it's just, I don't know, it's just auspicious.
Yeah. I agree.
I thank everybody for their comments. It's really intense.
It really is. I mean, it's remarkable what the 3 of you all started is it just a week ago?
I think we all started on the same day.
It really is remarkable now when I think about it, because you are.
It was Tuesday.
Yeah, last Tuesday.
Wow.
It really is remarkable. I am one heck of a teacher. No, I will acknowledge that I think I have become an effective teacher, but it's because of what I'm teaching. This is nothing. I didn't come up with this. I'm glad I didn't have to. I'm glad that I'm glad that Siddhartha Gautama set out on his search 2,600 years ago to figure this out, because I certainly couldn't. But he presented it in such a way that it can be overwhelming, but it's also pretty clear where it's going, isn't it?
Yeah.
And he provided that. Yeah.
Like even though it, I say it's overwhelming, but there's like this piece that I have, like, in it. I don't know. There's like, it's overwhelming because for me, it's like deconstructing these like ways of. Yeah,
it is.
Yeah, and that in itself is just like, it's like an overwhelming sensation of I don't know, I can just feel it. I don't know.
I know. That's exactly how. Now, you're also fortunate in a way that you haven't spent many years studying in, first I'll start with modern New Age thought. Again, I'm not putting it down, it's just different. And many years engaged in the modern presentations of Buddhism. Because the students that I have, and not just here, I have some students online because of the Truth of Happiness book. You can take that course online. The ones that have the most difficult time, in fact, almost everyone has completed the course once they started, but the ones that haven't are the ones that just couldn't get past the condition of how Buddhism is presented today. And some of them just said, this is nonsense. This can't be, the teachings of the Buddha can't be Buddhism. It must be something else. You're fortunate that you haven't had that aspect of conditioning, but I had to. It took me many years, even though I knew that what I was looking at and developing now was the true Dhamma, to recognize all of that conditioning that many years have imposed on me in very, very subtle ways. It's hard to. I first learned transcendental meditation, which is a mantra-based meditation. You learn a sound and you repeat the sound over and over again. Again, I'm not putting down TM, but after 2.5 or 3 years, I think, it wasn't taking me any further unless I had a lot of money to spend, which kind of put me off. But even after I abandoned that and started developing Shamatha-Vipassana meditation, for the first few years of that, every now and then the mantra would just be, I'd find myself using the mantra, even though my focus was because of such a deep conditioning with that. It took a while to get past that. So you're fortunate that you don't have to let go of all of that stuff, but there's still work to be done, and we have a gentle framework, that Eightfold Path is remarkable. Just to go one more moment, when the Buddha presented the Eightfold Path, he described it this way. This path avoids the extreme views. Now he's talking about the extreme view of nothing really exists to everything exists in an ongoing way. And the Buddha says, I present the Eightfold Path as a middle way between those extreme views, but between all extreme views. And what that ultimately means is that developing the Eightfold Path allows us to be human beings. It's a path for human beings to realize their true humanness in each moment as moments occur. We don't lose anything except ignorance. Incredibly gentle and incredibly compassionate, isn't it? And incredibly
Were
wise.
humans ever that way?
Pardon me?
Yeah, it's interesting. Were humans ever that way? We got to where we are, but when I read history of Mesopotamia and the Hittites, and it was same as we are, same ignorance.
Result always the same, isn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So when did, and this is not related to the class, but when I'm reading about Buddha and I'm reading the suttas and reading the book and listening, there's this thing that Buddha came up with that when he became enlightened. I mean, it's almost.
Yeah, I agree.
Because when were humans as a society ever not ignorant and having all these faults? I mean, we really haven't changed. We're still fighting. We have, if we're lucky, 80 times around the sun. If we're lucky. Yep. Right? And we waste our time fighting and being suffering and going through all these bad things. But Buddha recognized, that, right?
Yep.
Recognized, and throughout history, it was the same. The Mesopotamians, and they didn't have 80 years. They were lucky to get 50.
Yeah, that's true. So why do you think that is?
I don't know.
That's what the Buddha awakened to, dependent origination. From ignorance to 12 observable causative links. All manner of suffering, all confusion, deluded thinking, and ongoing suffering, unsatisfactory experiences arise from ignorance, from not understanding four truths. And that is the entire teachings of the Buddha. He spent 45 years explaining that, and that's what the different sutras are about. It is extraordinary. Now, the Buddha was also, a lot of the Greek philosophy was already present, and it's something, I better not go too far with this, and the Buddha was aware of that. And he also looked at it and said, that's not what I'm looking for. That's not the answers I'm looking for. He wanted to understand the nature of human disappointment and suffering. And also, is there a way to bring an end to it? And that's what he discovered. So when he says that dukkha occurs, he's talking about what's occurring right now in our lifetime, but he's also talking about past and future history. I'm going to talk a little bit more about this Saturday. Maybe this relates to karma and rebirth. As a consequence of having a human life, you are prone to confusion, delusion, and suffering. Doesn't matter what era you were born in. They're all, in that way, they're all the same. So what's the solution? What's the answer? Stop having human lives. Stop being so enamored with human life. And while you're developing the Dhamma, to realize how auspicious it is to have the opportunity to awaken in this human life. And why that's so important, why this sutta is so important, is that no matter what's occurring in our individual life or on the planet, our society, in our corner of the world, ultimately doesn't matter. What's most important is that I awaken. The most loving thing I can do for myself and for every other sentient being is to awaken. Because then I'm not contributing to the suffering in the world anymore. That's all I can do. And in that way, I end the possibility of giving birth to another moment rooted in ignorance. Pretty good deal, isn't it? And we can do it right now. We can do it right, meaning in this lifetime, we can do it. So, great question, great comments, great class. Let's finish with, I always finish with metta. And it's just, this is, I try to keep these classes, finish them by 8:30 or 8:45, so it's just 8:45. Find your relaxed meditative posture and gently close your eyes and gently close your mouths. And again, take a moment to become aware of the sensation of breathing in your body and let that mindfulness of your breath cease any distracting thoughts to the past or to the future. or that may have arisen from our talk today. And these are the Buddha's words on metta from the Karaniya Metta Sutta. This is what should be done by one who is skilled in goodness and who knows the path of peace. Let them be able and upright, straightforward and gentle in speech, humble and not conceited, contented and easily satisfied, unburdened with duties and frugal in their ways, peaceful and calm and wise and skillful, not proud or demanding in nature. Let them not do the slightest thing that the wise would later reprove. Wishing and gladness and in safety, may all beings be at ease. Whatever living beings there may be, whether they are weak or strong, omitting none, the great or the mighty, medium, short, or small, the seen and the unseen, those living near and far away, those born and to be born, may all beings be at ease. Let none deceive another or despise any being in any state. Let none through anger or ill will wish harm upon another. Even as a mother protects with her life her child, her only child, so with a boundless heart should one cherish all living beings. Radiating kindness over the entire world, spreading upwards to the skies and downwards to the depths, outwards and unbounded, freed from hatred and ill will. Whether standing or walking, seated or lying down, free from drowsiness, one should sustain this recollection. This is said to be the sublime abiding. By not holding to fixed views, the pure-hearted one, being freed from all sense desires, is not born again into this world. Thank you all for a wonderful class tonight. Peace. So Tim, have a great vacation.